Hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. I see friends far and near. We've got some people actually joining from Asia. Thanks so much. And I want to let you know a couple of things. First, this exciting fireside chat is brought to you by the Luminarian Fellowship. Our goal is to try to build a community of thought leaders around innovation. And we're so excited to have Dr. Bernie Meyerson here with us. I'll introduce him in a moment. But also wanted to let you know that Innovera is the sponsor. The Luminarian Fellowship is an initiative of Innovera, and our focus is to try to help companies, large and small, get better around the notion of innovation, which is so important in this age of AI, where things are changing rapidly. People don't know what to do. We want to give people the courage, strength, and knowledge of how to execute in this uncertain world. And part of our experience is to build these webinars so that we can all learn collectively. We do not have the answers. We want to share and crowdsource the possible solutions. And I love the William Gibson quote, which is, "The future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed." And part of the Luminarian Fellowship is to build a community that will allow and afford some of that distributed knowledge to come together. We're so excited to have Dr. Bernie Meyerson here, someone who at IBM was driving innovation as the Chief Innovation Officer Emeritus. Over a remarkable career spanning 4 decades, Dr. Meyerson has helped architect one of the world's most durable innovation engines at IBM. And if you know anything about IBM, huge organization, Lou Gerstner wrote the book. Of course, Who Says Elephants Can't Dance? The notion of IBM being agile and flexible as an innovation and technology leader is still with us, thanks to guys like Dr. Bernard Meyerson, who joined us here today. Bernie, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate your taking the time to share with us so that we can learn and grow.
Well, appreciate the opportunity.
We're going to jump right in. We have, just from a format perspective, we'll be talking for about 40 minutes. My great colleague, Zamir, will jump in to share a few more words about what we're doing at the Luminarian Fellowship in Innovera. And then we'll finish up with questions. Now, unlike most webinars, this is an open mic session. So I'd ask you to populate questions in the chat. If you have dogs or cats, make sure your microphone's on mute. And then we'll come back with live questions at the end. And I know I probed one of my colleagues on the call here to make sure he has a question ready. So as we go through this, please capture your questions. Make sure your mic is on mute, and we're going to get started. Let's jump in. So Bernie, you've heard this quote, I'm certain: "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." What kind of culture truly supports large-scale innovation at a company like IBM? Tell us some stories here.
Well, it's a challenge. I mean, look, companies come and go. The average residency of a tech company, I forgot, the last time I looked, it was about 6 or 7 years. We've been around well over 110, 112, And by the way, I always need to say this, whatever I say here, it's my opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of the IBM company, though I am speaking on behalf of 40 years of experience with it. Um, the thing about culture is it really has to be ingrained all the way from the top to the bottom. It's not enough to have little pockets. And IBM, curiously, if you go way back, where the culture of innovation began to be, I'll say, cemented. And you're going to forgive me, I'm going to butcher some of the very fine details of the story, but I will get the overall one right. If you go back to the founders, TJ Watson, basically he was on a tour of a factory in upstate New York, and as he was going through the plant with the plant manager, he would look out the windows as he went down a hallway, and there was somebody sitting out, smoking a pipe, reading a magazine or some sort of writing out on the lawn, just doing nothing seemingly. And he looked with interest at this gentleman, but he just kept walking with the plant manager. He didn't really think much of it. But when he came back the other way, the guy was still out there reading the magazine or newspaper. And about the third or fourth pass, finally, Watson asked the plant manager, who was looking increasingly nervous, who is this guy? Why is he on our property? And he said, well, sir, honestly, he is one of ours. Um, uh, he's out there because honestly, sir, he goes out there, he sits there, he reads whatever he reads, and every once in a while he comes in with an idea that's worth several hundred times his compensation in a year. And you know what? I don't even know how you manage a guy like that, so I just provide air cover. And it was very interesting. At that time, Watson really looked at that and said, you know, I don't care what the procedures are and the rules in the company. Are you serious? And he looked into it, and yeah, the guy was incredibly, incredibly smart. And he would just sit out there and cogitate, and every once in a while came up with a big win. And so he came back with this idea. And the idea was we're going to protect what he called affectionately the wild ducks. These are not quacks. Don't go there. Everybody tempted to. And the guy actually created a program where he realized that people like that, who are absolutely the invaluable innovators of a company, have to be protected because under any normal manager, other than this wonderful gentleman up in this plant, they would have fired the guy. I mean, he's out there doing nothing, right? So he created a program called the IBM Fellow Program. And this was fairly limited. Typically, you had one, two, three, four, five a year at max. It wasn't unusual to have only 40 or 50 in the world. This is out of hundreds of thousands of people. We're not talking a big group, but they had extraordinary executive air cover and access. If they really felt strongly about something, they literally, if they wanted to, could go to the chair and the board if they had to make the point that we're just missing some massive transition. And that program has become core to the not the strategy, rather, but rather just the culture of the company. And there are many pockets. So that is the beginning of what you just asked about, where culture will eat strategy, because I will tell you that there are several fellows who are noted for having eaten our strategy for lunch for a good reason, which is it was wrong.
So, thinking about this notion around IBM fellows and maybe protecting those that are innovators in the organization, one of the concerns that many companies face is that innovation is this sort of area, or R&D is this area over here. How do you sort of imbue the culture of an organization to incorporate innovative ideas and practices across, silos?
That's it has to scale. I mean, that's really what you're asking. Innovation doesn't work. Innovation without an outcome is not innovation. It's just, twiddling your thumbs with great success. The challenge is, how do you scale it? And the way you do that is motion, movement, freedom to basically engage. You'd be shocked. I mean, people have this notion of folks who are, for instance, not just a fellow, but we have distinguished engineers, same idea, very innovative people. These are folks who would rather die than just sit in an office and contemplate their navel. I mean, these are guys who want to go out and do things. There's men and women who are absolutely brilliant, and they are driven to see it in the market. And the beauty of it is there is a very well-established mechanism by which these same people who have had these great ideas can follow them literally out to a plant and make them reality. And there is nothing as satisfying. I mean, it's extremely hard to imagine how satisfying it is to see something that you really conceived from ground zero go out there and turn into $1 billion business. I mean, this is incredibly rewarding, and the trick is to enable people to do that at scale, and it's very, 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 very tough. It can be done, and we've been quite successful. We're not perfect. No company is perfect. Lord knows we have had, hit and a miss. It happens. But as a whole, if you look through IBM's history, there have been extraordinary wins. And it's because people were willing to stand up and say, this will work. I will bet on it. And it did.
So that's great. I just want to, for those of you who are just joining here, we're talking with Dr. Bernard Meyerson, Chief Innovation Officer Emeritus at IBM, who had over 40 years driving innovation at IBM. We're talking about culture and the notion around culture. I have one more question around that. So, how do you think about is there a moment at IBM where you can share with us that sort of where culture really sort of enabled innovation to flourish? And you told one story as we prepared for this webinar. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. That was a bet your life story. There was just a consensus in the company and lots of initial data that said that we could build what's known as the mainframe, which is, of course, an incredible capability. And yet, to do so, the bet was extraordinary. It was virtually a bet the company kind of undertaking where you were investing the actual revenue of a year in a project, not the profit, the revenue of a year, that kind of thing, where it either works or you're not here anymore. And yet it was believed by those in charge at that time, Watson Jr. and the rest of the team, that, yeah, this is going to be the bet. And the bet turned out to be right. And IBM became this massive undertaking as a consequence of the success of basically creating the ability to do high speed computing essentially pervasively across the planet. And that kind of a bet your life, it's you don't want to do them, how should I put it, foolishly. There are a lot of people who do it foolishly. They're not with us anymore. But rather, when you have culture, and the culture is interesting, the culture is data wins. That is a very important aspect. Lord, people, if you look, there are all sorts of hype now where you hear people, CEOs and others who get out there and essentially spout hype about what's going to happen. But if you don't have data, it's nonsense. And ultimately, it'll collapse. In this case, one of the nice things about having this core of people who you can count on, you can actually lean on them and say, hey, look, I'm betting the company on this. I'm betting the farm, or I'm making multi-billion-dollar bets. Will it work? And is it reasonable? And if you have a group of people you really trust who don't have a stake in it other than getting it right, it's precious.
So maybe let me drill down a little bit on this sort of data wins concept. Can you provide an example where this sort of thing occurred at IBM and where data won the day?
Yeah. The program that I led, which basically created ultimately something you probably heard of. Yeah, I guess you've heard of Wi-Fi, right? And I guess your audience is familiar with that. We didn't invent it. We just made it financially possible. What happened was we were using computers back in when I joined IBM based on what are called bipolar transistors. The challenge with that kind of a transistor made in silicon is it burns a lot of power and it doesn't scale particularly well. As you make it smaller and smaller, you're basically shrinking the thing vertically until basically electrons kind of leap across the little space that's left and it leaks like a sieve. It doesn't work. Okay, there's a speed limit, about 30, 40 gigahertz. It was about as fast as these transistors could run. And we knew we were running out of speed. Okay, I remembered reading a paper written 30 years ago by somebody who had been at Bell Labs and moved on, and Herb Kromer. He was at UCSB at this point. And the paper said, well, he invented, and the gallium arsenide, indium phosphide, along with Sharkley and Cabrera. These are the very exotic high-speed materials. And what struck me about them, because I'd worked with him, is there was not a chance in the world you'd make computers of them. They just don't integrate at the scale you need. But he also mentioned this really interesting thing, which is called silicon germanium. He said, if you could just mix silicon with germanium, you could actually produce the same super high performance devices. The only problem is for 30 years, people felt it to be physically impossible. And I should say that during our initial work to prove that it actually was possible, I would say that we were not regarded friendly as being people's friends. And the reason was, first of all, we were kind of threatening the existing technologies. And secondly, to be honest, and reasonably, people said they had been trying to do it for 30 years and given up. Why should we try? The bottom line is, turns out there was a literature error made about 30 years prior proving you can't do this. And it turns out the error was just that, an error. Having spotted it, I went and got a piece of data that showed that, by the way, this thing that everybody, 10,000 papers quote, is wrong. And if it's wrong, you can make this material. And lo and behold, data. And all of a sudden, with this one piece of hard data, a couple of things happened. One, government funding showed up because the government would love to have something based on silicon, cost a factor of hundreds less, and works. And inside the company, for all the heckling that went on, we then went and produced transistors that ran a factor of 2 faster than anything even predicted, and went on to run factors of 10. So the bottom line is, what got us the funding and the support we needed was this literally one piece of data that showed that all the assumptions for the previous 30 years about it turns out about how you clean a piece of silicon, as ridiculous as that sounds, they were wrong. And so again, it's that little piece which then let us go to a place called Harris Semiconductor, where they actually were building these exquisite little cards. Imagine, you got to understand the perspective. This was 16 to 24K dial-up times. Okay, I am that old, believe me. Meanwhile, these guys had two computers a couple of meters apart, and they were transmitting a video between them wirelessly at megabits. And I'm standing there going, you got to be kidding. But then when I asked what the cards cost, they were like $1,000 because they were using exotic materials. We took a look at it and did some calculations. We figured we could probably build them for $10. We told them 40, but that beats 1,000. And so everybody was happy, and they spun out a company called Intersil. We became the supplier, and they became dominant in Wi-Fi for about 10 years. I mean, again, that one little piece of data showing the error in a previous piece of work, all of it spun from that.
Yeah, that's great. So, thinking of shifting a little bit of gears to structuring innovation for success in organizations. So, what's the biggest myth about how innovation should be structured in a large organization?
Ugh, the biggest myth that you can dictate it. It's kind of funny, it's structure won't do it. Okay, people do it. You basically, and you have to also grow up and understand that there are multiple types of innovators. In other words, if you ask me the biggest myth, yeah, you need a really tall stack of management. Yeah, that's going to work well. No, innovation works in a very flat organization. That's one. Two, it's not, you don't give orders to innovate. That isn't how the world works. But what you do is you bring in people, and there are really two types of innovators. There's the discontinuous innovator. These are the guys, we had a guy named Bob Denard. One day he sat in his office, invented something you probably heard of. You ever hear of memory? Yeah, like DRAM. One human being, yeah, one human being basically did that. It was really pretty remarkable. And so, that's one version of it. The other one is you have, people who are come to work every day, and they basically just they know how to make it, 2% better every day. People forget these are innovators because if you do the math on that, that is precious. I once did a calculation, and basically we invented the disk drive many, many, many years ago. And believe it or not, the first disk drive weighed like 5 tons. We're not talking a lightweight device. If people had not been the continuous innovators who made a little improvement each time they did it, it would have weighed about 250,000 tons in a modern laptop, which could be problematic when you put it on your lap. The truth, of course, is it weighs ounces because every day there are the continuous innovators who showed up and made it a little better. You need both types. That's the other myth. It's not just the big brains who say, wow, I got this great idea. You have to be able to reduce it to practice and continue to do so. So there are a number of myths you got to defeat. And the most important thing you can do is you create an open society where, as the head geek, for want of a better word at times, I would, whenever people came into my organization, even at the lowest levels, and truthfully, we were pretty flat. We had only 2 or 3 levels typically. They got the same lecture, which is if you haven't shown up in my office in the last 12 months, told me I'm an idiot, and proved it to my satisfaction, you are failing miserably in your job. And, some people took that as a joke, but a lot of them actually made it a religious undertaking. And the interesting thing is the ones who took it as a joke watched the people who made it an undertaking and said, wow, they got ahead. And now everybody comes and tells you you're an idiot, but you learn an incredible amount. I didn't just roll over. Believe me, I pushed back hard. But two things happen. They learn, and occasionally I learned. I don't care how important you are, how smart you think you are, you do not have all the right answers. There are a
Yeah,
lot of issues you got to overcome.
That's really interesting. We're here for those who've just joined, speaking with Dr. Bernie Meyerson, Chief Innovation Officer Emeritus at IBM, served for 40 years and really created IBM as an incredible engine of innovation, which as a company continues today, where many companies are actually struggling in this world of increased volatility, shall we say. So getting back to this notion around structure and how do you think about it in many organizations, as IBM included, there's a sort of long-term horizon innovation. I'll call it sort of, horizon three. And then you mentioned just as we were concluding here that this last comment around incremental innovation, so critical to helping support core activities and making sure things are getting better and improving for customers and reducing friction and so on. How does a company like IBM think about this notion around sort of long-term horizon three thinking with sort of near-term business impact and balancing that tension?
It's very dynamic, to be honest. In other words, you can't live in one world. If you want to make the best use in an organization of the talent, what you do is you set aside a certain period of time during which people will, frankly, they may just sit there and say, there's this thing that has been bothering me. I observe the phenomena that I just don't really understand, but man, it would be interesting. And let them go off and do it. And you set aside a reasonable amount. I don't care if it's, let's say, 5%, but you have to set aside a period of time during which people can go and really do the breakthrough kind of innovation, how should I put it, experimentation that's needed. But the flip side of the coin is inevitably, if you've got the right people in your organization, some of them are going to trip over something that says, good Lord, look at that. And next thing you know, they're off and running with something that will move the needle for society, not to mention for the company. And so it is that balance, and it needs to be dynamic. It can't be that the people who do this then keep sitting in their office. It has to involve their engagement with the company so that the work they do scales. That is where people fail. If you allow the innovation engine to become an ivory tower and it becomes siloed, you're dead. And in fact, what you have to do when you hire these individuals to make that feasible, you need people who are extremely deep in one area. I mean, they could eat anyone for lunch in their home area, but they're also remarkably broad and they could explain special relativity to their grandmother. This is it. It is incredibly important. You don't talk, down to people. You have to be able to talk to basically at an equal level, and it's very, very important because otherwise you wind up with people who literally are, as like I said, ivory tower siloed, and nothing good comes of it in the long term. So that's the balance. You have to get out there. You cannot allow the innovation arm of the company to somehow be thought of as a separate entity that doesn't interact. In fact, it's a source of skills for elsewhere.
That's great. So a couple things that I want to highlight. One is the T-shaped person, right? Having that incredible depth, but also the breadth to be able to, as you say, communicate with grandma about physics and so on. I do want to sort of probe on one thing that you said. So imagine a company like the size of IBM and everybody is running off doing the 5% experiment with their time. Google had 20% at one point in their, I'm not sure if they're still honoring that for engineers. How do you sort of track that from a portfolio perspective? How do you know what people are doing with their time? That sort of need to have some tracking or mechanism, because if they trip over something, you kind of want to know about it, right?
I'm not sure. What I meant by the 5% was not that everybody spends 5% of their time on this. There are people at a level maybe, and again, I'm using a round number, but there's 5% of the organization that spend 100% of their time. Okay, this isn't about the problem is if you're really going to go after something big, 5% ain't going to do it. That will do it for the incremental stuff, but it will not do it for the breakthrough typically. That's one. Two, in terms of making sure that it goes somewheres, again, the division, we'll call it research, call it innovation, I don't care what you call it, has to basically take a leadership role in pushing things out rather than putting up barriers and saying, no, we're sacred, stay away from us. And there have been organizations, sadly, that went down that unfortunate ladder descriptor of, we're precious, stay away, and they're not with us anymore. The fact of the matter is that research should be seen as a beacon and a supplier of skills, not as something that's just ivory tower, we're off there thinking. It is, again, you have to allow the amount of time it takes to really do big stuff, but you've also got to make sure that once it happens, it gets out there. It's not about essentially 5% of each person's time. That will not do it.
Got it. And how are you tracking those projects that in your innovation purview? How are you tracking those projects? How are you managing that portfolio of really interesting things to determine what goes forward and what maybe goes on the shelf?
That's actually a remarkably formal process within research, where in fact, once a year, research puts together a outlook, a global technology. There are a bunch of name changes over the years. Basically, it's a global technology outlook for the world. And they actually take it all the way up to the CEO, chairman, board, you name it. They spend an entire day with all the senior executives of the company going over this project that runs for an entire year where people are, scraping scraping the various aisles of research and elsewhere, both inside and outside, to determine where these opportunities are and where the trajectory is going. So it is a highly formalized process that avoids becoming, again, this siloed entity.
Yeah, that's great. So we're talking with executive, sort of chief innovation officer emeritus, Bernie Meyerson of IBM. Want to invite you all to sort of, as you're noodling and hearing, you're thinking about potential questions. We're going to have a question and answer session to wrap up the session. Again, if you have a mic, you please keep that closed until such time that we invite you to sort of maybe ask your question, or if you want to sort of put it in the chat, feel free to do so. So we talked a little bit about sort of innovation programs and the kinds of ways you may be sort of tracking. Can you share just sort of, as you're thinking about, I'll call it governance. We don't want a heavy hand, but we've got to manage some of this stuff. How did you do it at IBM? How were you sort of able to encourage those that had great ideas to come to the fore and continue to get things done?
There are a lot of ways of doing that. One of which, I'll give you an example. We had, well over 200,000 technical people, but we created the IBM Academy. The IBM Academy is like the U.S. National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, which is, it was basically the members elect new members. It's by election only that you become a member. It's about 1,000 people or so out of the group. And that organization got together regularly to basically just among themselves bounce ideas around. And you'd be shocked how well that works because nobody can exist as an island. I mean, I am a fairly well-trained, deep-trained physicist. Of course, now I run many businesses, but the point is, there are lots of things I don't know. But the good news is I can pick up the phone and call 7 people who on their subject would have me for lunch. And that's ideal. And so you need to create a repository of those skills. That's one. Two, if you want to make it work, typically in that group, we had about another 100 people of that 1,000-person team that had a lot of experience taking things out into the market. They not only innovate, but they make innovation that matter. They get them out there and they've done remarkable things. So you get them together and you listen to them. I call this, at one point, we created something called the Academy Leadership Team, the sort of core 100 people. And I was up there on the stage with our chair at the time, Ginny Rometty. And, you have to ask the hard questions, which is, what do we do? What is the worst thing? What are we worst at? And one of the complaints that was fairly common is in a lot of instances, when you wanted to start something that was really exciting, that was using new technology with a client, it could take 3 months, 6 months, whatever, to get all the permissions and everything else going. And, that's not acceptable. And so basically, at that meeting, I just said, fine, how about 48 calendar hours, which caused huge amounts of laughter in the audience, given history. But to Ginny's credit, when it got all done and they left, she asked, how can I help? I said, just tell people get out of the way. I mean, and I put together a small team, about 20 people who I consider just, they're peers. I mean, yeah, they work for me, but let me explain. Every one of them could go off and run a company if they wanted to. And what we did was we created a program where if one of these people in this, anyone, by the way, anybody in the field, said they had something they really thought was very cool. They wanted to run with a client. They couldn't get funding, couldn't get help, couldn't get staff. We had a program. You literally simply sent us a note with, on a form saying, hey, I'd like to do this. This is what it costs. This is how long it'll take. I need this help, yada, yada, yada. And we actually would sit down and within 48 hours, thumbs up, thumbs down. And if it was thumbs up, we supplied everything. People, head count, the whole 10 yards, go get them. You didn't have to spend millions because these were technologies people felt were just at the cusp of going out. So they were there. They just hadn't gotten spread. The interesting thing was we also ran it like we would run a venture firm, which is because these were proven technologies, typically they were just ready on the cusp. We actually agreed that we would fund, let's say, I don't know, $300,000 for a project. You owed us 2x what we fund. However, if you made $100 million off of that because somebody went and engaged, you only owed us 2x, not the 100 million. You got to keep the rest, which people found hilarious. But if you really think about it, what we really said was we have to be 50% successful to be self-funding. And we were self-funding right off the bat. And it was remarkable. And the program became extremely popular. And what it did was what you asked about earlier, and it's a great question, is how do you get it to spread pervasively? How do you take innovation and push it out? That's how you do it, because the people who were on that team were extraordinarily talented and they were very technically deep. And they would go out and literally, when somebody said, I want to do X, many times they said, wait a minute, you can do X plus Y and Z. I know all these other guys. And next thing you knew, it was a really kind of cool project. It worked so well that IBM, interesting in its typical tradition, demanded that I come up with an acronym to name it. You know, you can't be the Bernie program, obviously. I know that. No kidding, right? And it was kind of funny. I hate acronyms. I mean, okay, the Itsy Bitsy Machine Company, right? The International Business, right? I'm not a fan of acronyms. We have way too many of them. So I came up with a solution finally. I gave it a name. It's called the SPEED program. And I love it because people always fall for it. They go, wow, what does SPEED say? You know, what does SPEED stand for? And the answer is it's not a damn acronym. Go look it up in a dictionary. I mean, it worked perfectly. People like, oh yeah, oh hell, that's an idea. This is a SPEED program.
Well, one of the things you said, I want to drill in just a little bit around really using the venture mindset to try to get. So you had a group of I'll call partners or
Yeah,
that would give the
basically.
thumbs up, and then you were sort of making investments, and you were also challenging the teams to think about sort of 2x the revenue. Can you share more about what was, get an example that particularly comes to mind that had a big win for IBM?
Yeah, and I won't use exact numbers. I must, there are limits to what I'll say. But what I will say is it was not unusual, where we'll fund. I'll give you an example. A chief technology officer will have an issue that they've been struggling with for 6 months, and there'll be five vendors competing to renew an existing major contract, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. And meanwhile, the client team will say, this poor guy who's in charge of this thing is ripping his hair out, or she's ripping her hair out because they just can't seem to get a solution to this one issue. But our team, who's there, the sales and engineering team, will say, I think we could solve it. How would you do this? And the answer is, okay, well, they come to us and said, look, if we can have some funding and staff, we actually think we could do a demo that would solve this person's problem. And we'll fund it and we'll staff it and we'll go chase it. It would not be unusual for us to make this, let's hypothetical. I'll give a $55,000 investment and win a $500 million contract, because the client will say the reason you won it is everybody else talked about what wonderful things they've done and you solved the problem I've been working on for 3 years. Nobody else had a clue even to begin. And it's that kind of payback. I mean, we're not talking 10x here. We're talking 100 and 1,000 at times. But again, it's not as, how should I put it? It's not as exotic as it seems, because remember, these are already technologies that have been developed, but people just haven't put them to the proper use yet to really win.
That's
And
great.
so, and
So let me just jump in just to related to this. So Magali asked a great question in the chat. What would be the consequences for teams who couldn't make the 2x back? What would happen?
oh, that's great. Nothing. How's that? I eat it.
Wait,
That's
well,
no, I'm serious.
but did the
We
teams?
we actually the team, you know what? We'd take them out to dinner. You have to understand, we're the ones who gave the thumbs up. It's not on them. It isn't. You have to accept responsibility for your own decisions. We would sit there and go, hey, we screwed that one up. Well, okay, move on. There is no venture firm in the world that's going to assume 50% success. We did. Now, it's cheating because, as I said, these are technologies that we could study and knew how they'd work. But the fact of the matter is, there was no risk. When I actually would explain that, because as we introduced the program, some of the managers they couldn't accept it. It's like, no, no, no. What actually happens if we don't succeed? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There is no downside. You have to be willing to take the risks yourself. So we were the risk takers, and the teams. That's why it was so popular, and
Yeah,
they didn't waste our time.
yeah. Well, one of the things we talked about at Stanford is to sort of experiment and learn rather than succeed or fail, right? And so the
Yeah.
learning part is really important. These teams, even with no financial success, are learning and growing, and that then builds a much stronger team. Speaking of teams, I'm going to shift gears. We talked a lot about talent in implied, but I want to sort of drill in specifically. So, as you've led incredible innovation teams, what are you looking for? How do you spot talent that will sort of contribute to your organization?
That list would take hours because it's not one thing. It really isn't. I'll give you an example, which will make a lot of sense. I was sitting at a conference in Washington, D.C., and I watched this young woman win the Best Paper Award at an IEDM conference, and she presented it, and she was clearly brilliant, just flat out brilliant. They then announced they also have a second to Best Paper Award. She stood back up and gave that talk. And I'm looking at this young woman and I'm going, yeah, this is someone who just if you simply looked in the context of the environment she was presenting in, she was off the charts in terms of skill. Period. She was composed, she was expert, she not overbearing. I mean, really just got it dead on. You immediately go up and say, hi, I think you need to come work for us, basically. Her name was Lisa Su, who's now the chairman of AMD. And we hired her. And she was and still is absolutely top-notch brilliant. And, the bottom line is it's not one recipe. That's the problem. If you just try to do this by recipe, you'll get a lot of good people. You will not necessarily get great people. Great people means everybody eyes wide open. And you're not going to always succeed. I mean, look, it's like anything else. Your people are your investment. They will be, and you have to, as time goes, you have to figure out where they fit best. But my only point is, it is not one thing that you look for. You look for, yeah, this T where they can explain what they're doing and they're very deep and all that. But there are a lot of personality traits, such as leadership, the ability to lead by example as opposed to by abuse. Well, culturally, you've seen it. I don't have to spell it out. I guarantee everybody listening to this could think of a bunch of CEOs who lead by abuse. It's just not culturally going to work better by that. You can't beat people till they're happy. That's not how that works. You have to basically be a leader who understands how to make that work and how to make the compromise between maybe you'll only get 97% of the work out of people versus 100, but they won't all quit after 2 years.
Yeah. So along these lines, in fact, how do you retain the best talent without, I mean, you've heard about these sort of AI paychecks that are coming out, like sort
Yeah.
of buying talent, acqui-hires, and so on. How do you attract and maintain talent so they don't leave?
I mean, look, you have to be competitive. That's a given, right? In other words, you can't just underpay and overwork people. That is a guaranteed method to fail. Okay, so I don't have to explain why. But let's assume for a minute you take comp off the table in the sense that you know it's good. It is way more than just competitive. So let's stop there. That is not enough to retain people. To be clear, the way people are retained in my experience, and we've had a very good record there, is they feel free to just come in your office, sit down, chew on something, walk away, and pursue things that they see as just the opportunity of a lifetime. And if they're that good, by the way, you should be allowing that. And yeah, there are also, by the way, people who will come in and be here for 5 years, contribute massively, and then move on to a friendly startup and without any acrimony. But I'd rather that happen than them go and compete with us. And so it's not a perfect system. And yeah, you will lose people. I mean, let's face it, there are some people out there who are going to make ridiculous offers. I mean, just literally ridiculous, life changing. But the fact of the matter is, for the majority, you have to provide an environment where people actually get up in the morning every day and say, cool, this is what I'm going to go off and do. And I've had those opportunities offered and have turned them down, as have many, many people of my generation. We have enough. There is a concept of having enough, And it's more important to have, you go back and look at your peer and say, damn, we got a lot done, as opposed to, wow, I have the biggest jet. Okay, so I don't have a jet. I'll somehow I'll manage. It's it isn't just about the money. And if it really is just about the money, you probably have the wrong person anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So, last and final question. If you were advising a CEO today trying to scale innovation across his or her organization, what one uncomfortable truth would they need to hear?
One uncomfortable truth. It ain't always going to work. Seriously. Somehow people are under this naive assumption that, hey, we invented something. And the answer is yeah. And you know what? There are 500 different mousetraps that also work well, and your mousetrap ain't going any better, ain't going to do any better. It is a notion that somehow just because you've innovated, it's going to be a success. Innovation has to be tempered by actual knowledge of the field and a lot of other things, not to mention, by the way, dumb luck does come to pay, unfortunately. So you really, the first uncomfortable truth is be willing to accept failure. You're going to make big investments that go directly down the toilet. And that is just the nature of leading edge stuff. Now, the trick is to make sure the ratio of what is it? There's a famous expression I use. It's okay to learn from your mistakes. Please, Lord, do not learn everything that way. I mean, that's the point. And that is a hard lesson when somebody says, you spent how much and got how little? You're going to have those conversations. Just get used to it. Because you'll also have conversations where, let me get this right. You invested $50 million and you yielded 300 million or whatever, ridiculous number. Oh, nice. It's going to go both ways. I mean, I'm making up numbers, but you understand the point.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that. So I see there are a couple of questions in the chat. We're going to come back to those in a moment. Magali and Victor have already included a couple. So populate the chat. I'm going to turn it over to Zamir for a few minutes just to share more about the Luminarian Fellowship and also about Innovera. Zamir?
All right, thank you, Paul. Wow, such a great discussion. I can listen to you guys for a while. Can you hear my screen? I'm sharing the presentation at the moment.
I can see your screen, but I hear you. Never mind.
There you go. Um, so yeah, just wanted to say a few things about Innovera and Luminarian. So Innovera is the company that is supporting this webinar, and hopefully you can see my slides. I'm just double checking.
Not yet.
Not yet. So
No,
let me just
not
redo this
seeing.
one more time. Sorry about that, folks. How about now?
There you go. You got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. There you go. Okay. So
They're gone now again.
Now it
it's
just
gone
went
now.
away.
Interesting. Oh wow. I'm surprised why it's not allowing me to do that, but
Hmm.
let me see. Okay, so you see only this as soon as
Yeah, this is, yeah,
as soon as I go
you're
full
fine
screen, it
right there.
disappears, right?
Yeah. Well, work with this. We can all see it.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
see it.
All
Yeah.
right. We'll
Go
we'll
for
do
it.
it this way this time. Okay. So the Luminarian Fellowship is the program we're creating for C-level executives in partnership with Stanford Engineering Center for Global and Aligned Education. And it's a year-long engagement, but we understand that people are busy, so we've done it in a way so it consumes a little bit of your time. And we're kicking off our first summit in September at Stanford, September 11th. And we're building this fellowship on three core pillars, right? First of all, this is for those executives who are leading innovation, strategy, and growth inside of their large enterprises. And we're adding the learning component. We're bringing a lot of thought leaders into this program to share their best practices, their methodologies, and case studies in order to help fellows implement that inside of their companies. And the 3-day summit starts September 11th, and we're inviting people to join. Check the website. I'll share the link in the chat. And after that, we're going to have some virtual keynotes and a lot more engagement online because we got folks from different countries and different verticals. And of course, those who complete the program receive a certificate from Stanford University. The second component, I think it's the most important one, is the connections, right? So this is an invitation-only program where members are basically executives responsible for innovation. And, there's the thought leaders network that we bring into this group. So about 50 people are going to be joining the first cohort. So you get to meet great and amazing people who's written best-selling books and created innovative approaches to drive projects forward. So the connection part is super important, and there's going to be additional, leader content and some community events. And the doing part is also great because a lot of chief innovation officers, chief digital transformation officers, they're tasked with big projects. They got to lead transformation. They got to, create innovative projects, maybe new lines of business. So whenever they come into the fellowship with these big ideas, we surround them with proper expertise, the people they can rely on, with basically a support system they can lean on and tap into. And we also add the online component to manage those innovation projects, which is the Innovera proprietary platform. And let me talk a little bit about that platform here. So one of the challenges that we see in large companies and in the industry in general is that a lot of money is being spent annually on innovation, and majority of the companies, over 80% of the companies, basically they are not achieving their goals, and there's no correlation between how much is spent on R&D and then the financial success. So if you think about other functions in enterprises like sales, operations, HR, marketing, all of them have discipline, all of them have certain methodologies and frameworks and a lot of software to support. But when it comes to innovation, we're lacking to see anything that is helping drive these innovation projects forward. So Innovera is creating a platform that is doing that. And that platform is based on three major components. One is the proven methods, and I mentioned that we are engaging with top executives from the tech world, from the VC, from venture capital, from the research like Stanford and other organizations. They have proven methodologies on how things are working. And there's a stepped approach or taking the project from idea stage to commercialization stage. The second component is the platform itself, and it's powered by AI agents. It can do a lot of great things, but most importantly, it can shrink the time and the amount of resources that large enterprises are using in order to take the project from the idea stage to almost ready business case, right? In order to make that decision. Imagine taking the project to market 5 months faster. Right? So that's something that this kind of technology is enabling. And of course, there's this peer network of experts that are surrounding Innovera, surrounding Luminarian Fellowship, that are always eager to help, and they have a lot of experience in doing so. So in the end, what we are trying to create is taking an innovation management and creating a discipline around it, because at this moment right now is ad hoc, and we want to make sure that you can put a structure around it and you can make it more successful. And one final thing that I wanted to share today is that our next webinar is going to be happening on August 21st. We have our great friend Alex there. We're going to share the link with all of you after we finish today's webinar. So please mark your calendars. We will send additional invitations. And now, microphone back to you, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amir. Yeah, and it'll be fun with Alex. He's going to talk about AI and the venture mindset. So that should be a fun program. Again, one of the things we have, the reason we have Dr. Bernie Meyerson here with us is because we want to crowdsource solutions that will be right for you, whether your company's large or small. So excited to follow up with a few questions here. I'm going to start with my good buddy, Victor Leckman, who's posted a question in the chat. Bernie, you highlighted the power of 2% improvements, incremental improvements. In your experience, what part of IBM's culture brings the highest impact in attracting and nurturing people who naturally operate this way, who are thinking this way? And then he follows up, how can an organization culture show if it truly values these individuals? Any thoughts?
We actually, that actually is a great question, and we had to make some changes to make sure that was valued. That's an excellent question. We have, as I said, we have the IBM Fellows Program, and this tends to be, let's go invent high temperature superconductivity and win the Nobel Prize. That's kind of cool. Or what we did was silicon germanium and a lot of other programs like that. But the folks who also do 2%, and by the way, we certainly did that. Once we had the silicon germanium program up and running, then it's just literally turning the crank to make sure every generation of technology got better, but the basic physics was done. We have a program similar to the Fellows Program called Distinguished Engineers. It is an executive program. It is like the Fellows Program. You are a technical executive. Sure, you could be, you could manage an enormous organization, or you could be a solo contributor. That's not the point. Either way, you are still an executive, and basically becoming a distinguished engineer enables you to essentially be recognized for the fact that you are one of these folks who show up every day and just make everything better. And it doesn't have to be that you invented some brand new term, part of physics or chemistry or biology or whatever, but rather that you have this extraordinary second sense that, if we just did this, it'd be a little better each day, or a lot better, actually, to be fair. I mean, a lot of them make huge differences. And so, yeah, there are two different programs specifically to acknowledge that there is a large cadre of folks who are just extraordinary at improving things.
Yeah, I don't know, Victor, I see you on camera. Any follow-up for Dr. Meyerson?
Dr. Meyerson, thank you so much. It's a great answer. Thank you.
My pleasure. That was easy. We actually know that one. A lot of things I don't know.
Magali asks a question again. Thank you for your contributions. So how do you go about betting on unproven technologies, if at all? Those that are unproven, you don't know if they're going to work and so on. How do you think about that? I suspect that potentially data might be an answer.
There you go. Data wins. Look, I mean, believe it or not, okay, for 30 years or so, they didn't think you could make silicon germanium. And the reason is if you had to heat a silicon wafer up to 1,000 degrees centigrade to clean it and run and grow films on that wafer that contains silicon and germanium. Trouble is, germanium atoms are about 4% bigger than silicon. They all run around, and you get a big stack of germanium in one place and silicon everywhere else, and that's a disaster. That's useless. You need a uniform film. It turns out that was predicated on the idea that silicon instantly oxidizes on exposure to air. So even if you take off contaminants and native oxide and everything else, it grows back instantly before you put a wafer into a chamber and grow something. Turns out that was an error. It was a spectacular error made and repeated by thousands of papers that cited that because it sounds so totally reasonable, even though it's completely bogus. The data, again, that showed that that was not the case is somebody actually, I work with a guy from Brookhaven National Labs, and after preparing a wafer the way we normally do, I said, go look and tell me how much native oxide is there after you leave it in air and go have lunch. The guy came back, said, what the hell did you do? There is no oxide there. That runs counter to, 30 years of literature. And the fact was, 30 years were wrong. Now, that one piece of data, even though we took a risk, said we can make these layers. And by the way, we did, and the stuff worked. So sometimes it's not unproven, and you don't have to have the finished result. You just need enough data to think that you crossed the barrier. And so that's how we do it. Did you cross the barrier? Data wins. We crossed the barrier.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. So I have two more questions. Not sure if we'll get to both of them, but we'll. So Kunnak asked this question in the chat. And in today's highly competitive market, where are new innovations being developed around the world and sort of entering the market every day? What would you recommend innovation teams sort of do to stay ahead of the market to ensure business growth?
Oh, look everywhere. Do not be insular. That is the biggest mistake people make. a large company cannot assume you're good at everything because, by the way, you're not. One of the greatest skills an executive needs to learn is what you don't know. Know what you don't know and make damn sure you're looking outside. There are numerous ways of doing that. The World Economic Forum has a huge operation looking at emergent technologies. There are good ways to look, as our American Physical Society, IEEE. All of these organizations have forward-looking operations, and you need to be looking broadly. You cannot just look one place.
Yeah, that's great advice. Trend spotting is critical. And we have a program at Stanford. So come our way and we'll all be able to crowdsource and share great ideas.
And
Final
I didn't
question.
set that up.
I took the opening. Final question Kelvin asks, and this is going to potentially exceed but I'll give you 30 seconds here. How can we continue to pursue innovation in this era of AI?
Because AI is not innovative. AI is the world's best search engine. It is not that bright. If you ask AI, frankly, about whether a silicon wafer oxidizes immediately upon release in air, in spite of the fact that it doesn't, it'll say yes. Why? Because 30 years of literature said yes, and it just counts. It ain't that bright. It's a very powerful tool. It's a wonderful tool. And in fact, the more constrained AI is, the better it is. So when you're doing agentic AI, where you have a well-defined and curated set of data, it actually does very well. But if you just look at all the stuff out in the literature, it picks up all the good stuff and the bad stuff. And so you can believe me when I tell you, we are nowhere near the point that will substitute for human intuition and human ability. It just is a fantastic facilitator of that work because it can look through quantities of data you wouldn't have a hope of having access to. So it scales nicely in looking, but it doesn't give you the right answer all the time.
So Bernie, I think there's probably a lot more to be discussed in that. That's a whole hour.
That's another talk. Separate animal.
We're gonna leave it there. Thank you all for joining. It's been a delight. For more about Luminarian Fellowship and for Innovera, please contact us. Zamir is going to share the links, and we'll also be recorded this. If you have colleagues that should be listening, please attend. And then finally, we have on the next August 21, Alex Dang going to be joining us. We'll be back at it again. So thank you again. And with that, we wish you a good afternoon, good evening, good day. Thank you.
See you later.